When we look at history, the arrival of a king usually follows a predictable formula. We expect the ceremony of a palace, the influence of immense wealth, and the immediate backing of military force. But the narrative of Jesus of Nazareth ignores that formula entirely. His story begins in the silence of Nazareth, a small, dusty provincial town. Here, in the fading golden hour light, an ordinary young woman named Mary is busy with her daily work. This quiet routine is broken by a blinding presence. Gabriel arrives with a staggering claim. She will bear a son whose kingdom will never end. The contrast is immediate. On one hand, a cosmic, eternal promise. On the other, a vulnerable teenager sitting in the dirt of a peasant home. It raises a difficult question. Why would a world-altering power bypass the gleaming capitals of the Roman Empire to begin its work in a forgotten backwater? The answer takes shape months later in Bethlehem. The town is loud, chaotic, and overcrowded with travelers. For Mary and Joseph, there is no room at the inn. They are forced to the very edge of town, finding shelter in a dark, cold stable. There is no comfort here, only the physical reality of the damp and the dark. When the child is born, he is wrapped in simple cloths and placed into the hay of a wooden feeding trough. This entry into the world with zero earthly comfort was a deliberate choice. It established a new kind of power, one that begins in a state of total vulnerability. While the miracles often get the attention, for the vast majority of his life, Jesus was an anonymous laborer. He spent his years as a carpenter, working with his hands in the heat of the day. He lived within the limits of a human body. He felt the wind's harsh grit, the ache of tired muscles, the sharp pang of hunger, and the sorrow of losing friends. His life was the intersection of two identities. On one side, the human limitations of hunger, pain, and exhaustion. On the other, the glowing reality of divine authority. Living through everyday struggles built genuine empathy. He didn't just observe the human condition from a distance, he stepped into the dust and lived it. That humanity eventually collided with his divine nature. On the Sea of Galilee, a violent storm threatens to pull a small boat under the waves. Inside that boat, Jesus is fast asleep. It is a moment of sheer physical exhaustion, the sleep of a man whose body has been pushed to its limit. His panicked disciples wake him as the boat fills with water. As he stands up into the whipping wind, the two sides of his identity meet. He speaks 3 words: peace, be still. The transformation is instantaneous. The chaotic water flattens into a mirror-like surface, and the storm vanishes. Only a human could be that tired, but only the divine could command the forces of nature. This tension reaches its breaking point at Golgotha. 3 crosses stand silhouetted against a dark sky. Here we see the final expression of his humanity. He is in agonizing physical pain, facing the same end every human life eventually meets. He whispers his final words, "It is finished," as his breath leaves him. The earth itself reacts to his death. The ground begins shaking and cracking, tearing through the rocky landscape. The dust of the earth and the finality of the grave appear to overcome the promise. Then comes the morning. In the early mist outside a sealed cave, the silence is broken. The massive stone sealing the tomb is rolled away. Brilliant light breaks out from the darkness of the entrance. Mary Magdalene arrives to find the tomb empty. An angel points toward the sunrise, confirming that the story didn't end in the dark. The logic of his journey was purposeful. The descent into death allowed for the triumph of the resurrection. His poverty, his labor, and his agony were not failures. They were the specific ways he reached a world in need. By choosing to inhabit the human condition, he proved that the life he brought was more resilient than the grave. He showed that even in the dust, there is a hope that cannot be extinguished.